The outcast. Her body was too big to reproduce, so they cast her out. But only one human made her a mother. They always laughed when she entered the square. Not just the children, though their laughter was the sharpest. It was the adults too. Older women with narrow shoulders and finely sculpted jaws, their delicate voices laced with venom disguised as amusement. Too tall to carry anything but shame, one murmured. She must have been meant for another planet, said another. One with no ceilings. They didn't even try to hide their snickers anymore. After all, she wasn't one of them. Not really. Just a visitor. A genetic error. 8 feet 2 inches. Juno knew every inch of it. Knew how her head skimmed the glowing archways of Valia's central pavilion. Knew how her hips barely fit between the public transport rows. Knew how her hands, her long-fingered, calloused, unpretty hands, curled protectively around her pack, not because she was afraid, but because the stairs made her feel like a zoo exhibit. Look, a child whispered, tugging at its mother's sleeve. Is she broken? The woman didn't answer. She just smiled, pitying and cold. She's human, she said gently. They don't build them right. Juno kept walking. Her boots echoed too loudly on the biostone. Even the ground seemed to betray her, unable to carry her weight without broadcasting it. The thud-thud-thud of her steps felt like a punishment. She ducked beneath the lattice arch again, the same one she'd hit her forehead on her first week here. The scar had healed, but she still flinched at the memory. Someone laughed. They should have brought a shorter model, came a voice from the seated group near the herb vendor. I heard humans came in normal sizes too. She's not unwell, another voice said in the same breathless tone people used when trying not to sound cruel and failing. Just unparable. And there it was again, that word. Unparable. They didn't mean romantically. Not here, not on Valia. They meant biologically. She couldn't carry. She was, by all official measurements, an empty shell. Juno's reproductive lattice didn't respond to the pairing protocol used by the Velaran match matrices. It was the first thing they scanned upon her arrival, before they even showed her where the bathing quarters were. No sync activity, no fertility resonance, no capacity for neural maternal bonding. She has no frequency, the tech had said, blinking at the results. No harmonic window, another corrected. In short, her womb did not sing. On Velhia, that was everything. It meant her strength, her intelligence, her skills, none of it mattered. Her towering frame, so revered on Earth's athletic circuits, was now a punchline, a malfunction, a burden they were forced to accommodate but never embrace. And still she walked the glittering streets of the alien city every day, enduring the whispers, pretending she didn't hear the wordless apologies in the translator drone's softened tones. Subject, Juno of Earth, human female, class Unlin. She hated that title most of all, Unlin. Not individual, not diplomatic envoy, just a body they had no use for. She paused on the bridge overlooking the lower terraces. The sun was falling, twin moons casting a pale violet glow across the glowing flora that shimmered along the water's edge. From here, the world looked quiet. Beautiful, even. But the silence only deepened the ache in her chest. Back home, she'd been a captain, a team leader, a woman with command in her voice and weight in her step. Here. She was an anomaly to be tolerated, a walking reminder that humans were too crude to fit into something as elegant as Velian bioculture. A gust of wind caught the edge of her jacket. She pulled it tighter, though the temperature didn't warrant it. Her reflection shimmered in the water below. Too tall, too wide, all harsh lines and heavy limbs. She tried to imagine herself as they saw her, oversized. Ungraceful. Biologically irrelevant. The grief was quiet, not sharp, not anymore, just a constant background hum, like tinnitus of the soul. The meeting. That evening, she took the long path back to her quarters, past the cliffside gardens, through the edge of the unlit grove where few citizens wandered at night. She liked the silence there. It didn't judge her. She reached the overlook, sat heavily on the stone edge, and let her legs dangle into the dark. Her back hurt, her ankles throbbed. The pack she carried dug into her shoulder blades. She hadn't eaten since morning. She rarely remembered to anymore, but the hunger had dulled into something more manageable than attention. Above her, the stars flickered. Different constellations than Earth. Alien patterns, unfamiliar stories. She wondered if any of them spoke of women like her. Too large, too strong, too visible to be loved. Then, movement. She turned her head. Down the path, half silhouetted by the glow of a grounded terracer, stood a man. Human. Shorter than her, maybe 5 feet 11 inches by the looks of it. Quiet posture, hands tucked into the folds of a field coat. His hair was dark, windswept, and his eyes, when they met hers, didn't flicker with curiosity or discomfort, just quiet recognition. He didn't approach. He didn't wave, but he didn't look away either. Later, she would remember that moment, the silence, the way the stars blinked in witness, the look on his face that said, "I see you," without saying anything at all. But at that moment, all she could do was lower her eyes, not out of shame but surprise. She wasn't used to being seen without being measured. The man stayed a few seconds longer, then turned and walked away. She stayed on the ledge long after, her hand resting over her chest as if trying to memorize what it had felt like when someone didn't flinch from her shadow. She didn't know his name. Not yet. But something in her had shifted, not healed, not softened, but cracked. And cracks, as she'd learned, were how light got in. Juno didn't sleep that night. She lay still on the narrow cot in her assigned dwelling. Spartan, square, and sterile. The walls hummed faintly from the power core below. A single vine from the exterior architecture had crept in through the ceiling vent, pulsing with soft blue light like a heartbeat she didn't recognize. She watched it for hours. Sleep wouldn't come. Not after the way he'd looked at her, not stared, not assessed, not ogled, just looked. She couldn't remember the last time someone had seen her and not immediately calculated her size, her potential, her threat. That man, Rowan, if she remembered correctly, had watched her like he was reading a language he only half understood but desperately wanted to. That shouldn't have mattered. Not here. Not on this planet where her usefulness was a daily negotiation and her worth was a diplomatic fiction. And yet it stuck. The stillness in his posture, the absence of pity, the way he hadn't looked away, it burrowed under her ribs like a slow burn. The next morning, her limbs felt heavier than usual. She rolled her shoulder until it cracked. Reached for the hydration unit and swallowed 2 gulps of filtered mineral water. Skipped breakfast again, she wasn't hungry, and pulled on her uniform. Another day of silent relevance. She made her way toward the lower quadrant where mineral scanners had malfunctioned overnight. Standard maintenance run. Hands-on, dirty, her kind of work. The corridors were less crowded this early. Fewer eyes, fewer whispers. The stone tiles underfoot were slick with dew condensation. Her boots squeaked once, and she winced. Every sound she made always seemed louder than it should have been. The entrance to the mineral sector was lined with curved obsidian spires, elegant like everything on Valia but unkind in how they forced her to stoop to enter. She ducked, stepped through, and found herself unexpectedly not alone. Rowan was already there. He knelt by the scanner core, elbow deep in the opened housing unit. Tools scattered in orderly precision beside him. He didn't look up when she entered. Juno hesitated. She could leave. She could turn around, request reassignment, pretend this was a misfile. Instead, she cleared her throat. Rowan glanced up, eyes blinking in the soft light. No surprise, no awkward fumble, just that same calm, steady gaze. "Didn't expect help," he said simply. "I didn't know you'd be here," she replied. Silence settled between them. Not sharp, not cold, just waiting. The connection. Rowan sat back on his heels, wiping his hands on a rag. Scanners cycling wrong. BIO feedback loops overloaded. Probably a thermal bridge collapse. She nodded. Can I assist? You know your way around wiring. I know how to keep my fingers from frying, she said. Most days. A flicker of a smile. Barely there. He shifted to make room. She dropped to her knees beside him, the stone digging into her legs, but she didn't complain. Her hands moved to the auxiliary panel, fingers scanning for heat signatures, feeling for vibration patterns. The work grounded her, mechanical, predictable. Nothing laughed at her here. They worked in tandem. No need to explain every move. No interruption, just tools passed back and forth, the occasional nod. Time thinned. The silence grew companionable. At one point their hands brushed, both reaching for the same cable clamp. She froze. So did he. But neither pulled away. Her eyes lifted. His had already found hers. It was barely a moment. A breath caught between them. But something shifted. It wasn't hunger. Not yet. It wasn't even longing. It was recognition. The kind that comes not from sight but from quiet survival. The scanner hissed back to life. Lights flickered green. The hum stabilized. They stood. She towered over him, a full head and shoulders taller. The difference should have made things awkward. But he didn't shrink, didn't joke, just looked up at her like it was normal, like she was normal. Juno shifted the tool belt on her hip. Thanks, he said, voice low. I could say the same. You usually work alone. I don't usually get assigned with humans. They think you can't pair. They think a lot of things. I don't, he said, and then added with deliberate softness, I watch. She held his gaze. Why? Because you move like someone who's forgotten how to be seen. She swallowed hard. The room felt smaller. He stepped back, not away, just giving her space. Noticing. Respecting. I'll log the repair, he said. She nodded. He turned, pausing briefly before he left. You're not unparable, Juno, he said. You just don't fit in the cages they built. Then he was gone. She stood alone in the humming silence, one hand resting on the warm scanner housing, her heart pounding louder than any machinery. No one had ever said that to her. Not without a sneer. Not without pity. And suddenly, for the first time in weeks, she remembered what hope felt like. It was a strange, vulnerable thing. But she didn't look away from it. Not this time. The next few days passed in silence, but not the kind that hurt. Juno resumed her work without fanfare. Assignments came and went. Drones buzzed through corridors. The city pulsed with its usual quiet elegance. She ate when she remembered, drank when her vision blurred, and stretched her legs on the long walks between sectors. But something had changed. She found herself listening for footsteps that matched Rowan's gait. She noticed the way certain doors opened just a little slower when he walked in behind her. She noticed that, for the first time in weeks, she wasn't avoiding eye contact. He never sought her out, never forced conversation, but he was there. Always quietly, always steady, always noticing. On the fourth day, she received a temporary reassignment to the outer agricultural terraces. Not a punishment, just a task no one else wanted, too far, too exposed, too primitive. She accepted without comment. By mid-morning, she was hiking alone down the moss-slicked ridge that led to the lower basin, pack strapped tight to her back, the weight of tools pressing down across her shoulders. The air changed here, less refined, less filtered. The scent of soil replaced the sterile ozone tang of the upper city. The horizon opened wide and unsymmetrical, stretching into fields of bioluminescent stalks swaying under distant sunbeams. She liked it. It felt unprocessed. Uncurated. When she reached the main cultivation hub, a small tented structure tucked beneath a jutting cliff, she was surprised to see someone already there, head bent over a failing irrigation console. Rowan, of course. He looked up as she approached, didn't smile, just nodded once. "Systems jammed," he said. "Filter mesh collapsed." She set her pack down beside him without a word. The rain. They worked for hours. No translator drones, no sterile command tones, just fingers in wet soil, knees in the mud, breath sinking through exertion. Her sleeves were rolled high, biceps marked with dirt and sweat. Rowan's face was streaked with grime, hair pushed back by a band he'd cut from the hem of his shirt. Juno liked how human he looked like that. Unfinished, not perfectly pressed, not shrink-wrapped for approval. He looked like someone who'd learned to endure. Midway through the repair, the skies opened. Rain fell fast, not hard, warm and constant, soaking them in seconds. They didn't rush, didn't complain. The crops needed the water anyway. She stood back, arching as she stretched out her spine, water cascading down the curve of her neck. Her uniform clung to her body, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't think about how she must look. Rowan stood beside her, chest rising slowly with the rain. He didn't speak, just turned his head and looked at her like a question answered. "You don't flinch," she said softly, not turning. "No reason to. Most men do. Or stare. I don't need to measure you to see you." She exhaled, slow and tight. "I used to be seen for what I could lift, what I could break. Then what I couldn't carry. You've carried yourself," he said. "That counts." They said nothing more. Later, after the rain had stopped and their work was done, they sat on the edge of the cliffs overlooking the glowing plains. The clouds split apart in the distance, letting shafts of violet sunlight dance across the valley. The light caught on her wet hair. Rowan handed her a protein bar from his rations. She took it, biting off a piece too fast. Choked, coughed once. He said nothing. Just passed her his water tube. "Thanks," she muttered, cheeks flushing. "You eat like someone who forgets she's allowed to need things." She blinked. The words hit harder than they should have. "Doesn't everyone? Some. Just forget how to ask." She looked down at her hands. Strong, calloused, dirt under every nail. "What did you leave behind?" she asked, voice low. Rowan didn't answer right away. His fingers curled around the rim of the rock, knuckles pale. "A family that talked over me," he said at last. "Rooms I never quite filled. I was the smallest, quietest, easiest to forget. That's why I came here. I thought maybe in a world this far from home, I could matter in silence." She turned to face him fully. "I was always too loud," she said. "Even when I didn't speak, my body did the talking for me. I tried to fold, tried to vanish. But you can't hide 8 feet 2 inches in shadow." He studied her. Not her size, not her shape, her. "You don't need to shrink. I don't know how to stop trying. Let me remind you." The words weren't romantic. They weren't flirtatious. They were something more dangerous, true. That night, as they parted at the edge of the ridge, he didn't touch her, but his hand brushed her arm just once, fingers glancing across the curve of her elbow. She didn't flinch. Not this time. When she returned to her quarters, soaked to the skin raw from work, she didn't wipe the mud from her face right away. She looked in the mirror and saw something unfamiliar. Not someone small, not someone broken, someone still here. Someone beginning to feel real again. The wind smelled like stone dust and wet copper. Juno stood at the edge of the lower terraces, the slope beneath her feet soft from the morning rains. The clouds were thin today. Filtered sunlight spilling across the mist-veiled valley in long silver sheets. The light painted her skin like metal. She didn't move. Behind her, footsteps crunched over the gravel. Light ones. Familiar. Rowan. He didn't speak as he approached. She didn't turn to greet him. They didn't need to anymore. He stopped a pace behind her. Waited. I didn't expect to be reassigned here again, she said. Neither did I, he replied. She smiled faintly. You think they're watching? They always are. But maybe they're not sure what they're looking at. She turned to face him then, slowly. Her body cast a long shadow over his. The difference in height undeniable, but Rowan never bristled beneath it. Never made it feel like a joke or a novelty. Do I intimidate you? She asked, eyes steady. No, he said without pause. But I think you scare the people who built this place to feel safe in sameness. She inhaled sharply, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. They said she was too big to bear life. Part 5, The Miracle. They moved to the slope's edge where the soil was warm, sitting side by side on an outcropping of root-covered stone. Below them, iridescent crops shimmered in slow waves, breathing with the rhythm of the wind. Juno stretched her legs out, boots caked in drying mud. She rolled up her sleeves. The sun kissed her forearms, pale scars catching the light. Some faded, some recent. Most came from before. Rowan offered her half of a nutrient bar. She took it. They ate in comfortable silence, watching the fields below pulse with alien life. Why did you really come to Valia? She asked finally. His eyes remained on the horizon. Earth didn't have answers anymore. My wife died in childbirth. Our son too. The doctors said it was genetic incompatibility. Juno's breath caught. I'm sorry. I came here to study their reproductive science. To learn. His voice softened. But mostly to be somewhere different. Somewhere that didn't echo with what I'd lost. She nodded, understanding more than she could say. Weeks passed. Their work assignments aligned more frequently. Someone in the system had noticed their efficiency together. The whispers continued in the city center, but somehow they mattered less. Juno still ducked through doorways, still felt the stares, but she carried herself differently now. As if her size was simply a fact, not a flaw. In the evenings, they would often find themselves at the cliff's edge, sometimes talking, sometimes silent. His presence became familiar, a counterpoint to her solitude, not an invasion of it. Then came the storm. A meteorological anomaly, the kind that happened once every decade on Valia. The sky turned amber, thick with ionized particles that interfered with the city's protective shields. The fields needed emergency stabilization or the crops would die, taking the city's oxygen supply with them. Without hesitation, Juno volunteered. So did Rowan. They ventured out as others retreated to safety, working frantically to activate the manual overrides on the field generators. The wind howled. Lightning, not blue like Earth's but a sickly green, cracked the sky open. They struggled against it, Juno's strength proving invaluable as she held structural components in place that would have flattened Rowan. They were nearly finished when the support beam collapsed. Rowan pushed her clear but couldn't move fast enough himself. The metal caught him across the chest, pinning him against the muddy earth. Juno didn't think. She moved. Her hands found the beam, muscles straining as she lifted, fueled by something primal and desperate. She threw it aside like it weighed nothing, though her shoulders screamed in protest. Rowan lay still, too still. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead. His breathing was shallow, pulse weak. Stay with me, she commanded, voice breaking. Don't you dare leave. The medical drones couldn't navigate the storm. The city was sealed. They were alone, cut off from help. Juno made a decision. She lifted him, his body so light against hers, and began the treacherous climb back toward the city. The storm raged. Visibility dropped to nothing. She navigated by memory and touch, one foot before the other, Rowan's life clutched against her chest. Her size, once a burden, now meant survival. Her strength meant hope. Hours later, she staggered through the emergency access port, Rowan pale but breathing in her arms. The medical staff froze at the sight of her, mud-caked, bloodied, towering in her pain and determination. "Help him," she said simply. And for once, no one laughed. Days passed. Rowan recovered slowly in the medical bay. Juno never left his side. The Velerans whispered still, but differently now. They watched her with something new in their eyes, not acceptance, not yet, but recognition. When Rowan finally opened his eyes, his first words were her name. His hand found hers, fingers interlacing. No hesitation now. No careful distance. "You carried me," he whispered. "You showed me how," she replied. Months later, when the planet's twin moons aligned in their rare conjunction, Juno and Rowan stood before the Veleran Council. The whispers had stopped. Something else had taken their place, curiosity, perhaps. Or simply change. "Your request is unprecedented," the lead elder said, voice echoing in the chamber. "So is she," Rowan replied simply. The council had deliberated for weeks. The genetic modification procedure had never been attempted on a human before, especially not one like Juno. But the storm had changed things. Saved lives. Proved worth beyond reproduction. "It may not work," the medical chief warned. "We understand the risks," Juno said. The process was painful, more for her than him. Cellular restructuring. Genetic recalibration. Her body fighting, then surrendering to the change. Rowan's genetic material integrated with hers, modified by Veleran science to create what Earth medicine could not, compatibility. Possibility. When they confirmed her pregnancy 3 months later, the city didn't quite know how to respond. Some still stared. Some still whispered. But others, the younger ones, the curious ones, began to approach her, asking questions, offering congratulations. Juno's body changed again, but differently this time, from within, with purpose. Her height remained, her strength undiminished, but now they served something new. She carried life the way she'd carried Rowan through the storm, with determination and grace. Their daughter was born as the first rains of the new season fell, tiny in Juno's massive hands but perfect, with Rowan's quiet eyes and something of Juno's strength already visible in the set of her tiny jaw. They named her Temra, bridge, in the oldest Veleran dialect. The day they brought her home, a small package waited outside their dwelling. Inside was a blanket woven from the iridescent fibers of the field crops, soft and shimmering. The note attached was written in the formal script of the council elder. "For the child who proves that adaptation is stronger than expectation." Juno stood in their doorway, her daughter nestled against her chest, Rowan's arm around her waist. She was still too tall for the archway, still had to duck to enter. The city was still built for bodies unlike hers. But now, she moved through it differently, not as an error, but as a pioneer. "Ready?" Rowan asked softly. Juno looked down at her family, one made against all odds, against biology and prejudice and an entire world's narrow definition of purpose. She had carried more than they thought possible. She had become more than they imagined aloud. "Yes," she said, ducking through the doorway one more time. "I'm ready." Behind them, the twin moons rose over the glowing fields, casting long shadows that stretched into something like a future. The end.